Hi, my name's Kim, and in this video I'll be reading books for the Trans Rights Readathon. This is a readathon that takes place at the end of March, currently through the 21st through the 31st of March, and so there's 11 days of being able to read and celebrate trans books by trans authors and books with trans characters as well. Obviously we should be reading trans books all year round, but the thing I really enjoy about awareness weeks like this and the heritage ones is that it really is a time that a lot of people come together and there's a lot of celebration and recommendations, and I really enjoy the community that pops up around those recommendations. I've participated for the last 2 years now, and I'm planning on participating this year, so I thought I'd share with you my kind of potential TBR for the Trans Rights Readathon, and then at the very end of this video I'll let you know my recommendations for the future about books that I've read in the past that I would recommend to you, because I have quite a few I'd like to celebrate. The first book on my TBR is A Short History of Trans Misogyny by Jules Gill Peterson, and this is on my 25 in 2025. It is a really short history of trans misogyny and talks about trans women and the transphobia and discrimination that they face, and from looking at the inside blurb it looks like it mentions trans women across the world, and the kind of injustices that they have faced. This is my only non-fiction that I have currently that I'd like to get through. It's super short, so it shouldn't take me too long, and it's one that I've been wanting to read for a while as well. I did have it on hold from the library, but I was like 50 people in line, so I ended up picking it up last year. Then I also have Her Majesty's Royal Coven by Juno Dawson. I have read one of Juno Dawson's other books, I think it's called Proud. It was one of her first books that she published, and so I have seen this one floating around for quite a few years now, and I've been interested in picking it up because all I know about it is that it follows a witchy coven in London and that's pretty much it, and that's pretty much all it says on the blurb too. I've seen fairly good things about this one, and so I'm intrigued about where it's going to go, and I do love the pink and the yellow on the cover. It really stands out. I really like those sorts of covers. I also have Little Fish by Casey Platt. This follows a character who's a trans woman who finds out that her grandfather might have been trans as well, and so I'm really interested to see this one. It tends to be that I pick up a lot of queer contemporary fiction more than anything else. I read one last year for the readathon, and there's a couple of others that I really like as well that I'll give you in my recommendations later, so I'm interested in seeing this one. It obviously is very well loved, and I've had my eye on this for quite a while as well. I know there's another book by Casey Platt as well that I've seen around that I'd like to get to. And then I also have Compound Fracture by Andrew Joseph White. This is the third YA novel of his. This is a queer Appalachian horror, and that's pretty much all I know about this one too. I've read the other two books that Andrew Joseph White has published, and I did like them both. The Spirit Bears Its Teeth was my favourite of the two, so I'm interested to see this one, and again, the covers on these ones are some of my favourites. I picked this up last year because I knew that I'd want to get to it eventually, and I really do like this cover. I think arguably, I don't know actually which one's my favourite. I'm looking at them on the back here because the first one is so iconic and the second one is very cool as well, but there's something about the colour on this one that I just really like. I have a couple of other books that I would like to potentially read. I think my priority is going to be my physical books, but if I do manage to get through all of those, or I just want to pick up something else, I have the second book in the Persons Non Grata series by Cassandra Core, which is A Song for the Quiet. I recently just read the first book, and this is a really short novella set in the same universe, and so I'd like to get to this one because I could always do a little bit of cosmic horror, and I have read most, I think if not all, of Core's published work aside from this, so I would like to get through it, and then I'm really anticipating the library at Helpful when that comes out in the summer. I also have a couple of books out from the library at the moment as well. So I have Phoenix Extravagant by Yoon-Ha Lee. All I know about this one is that there is automated dragons, and it sounds like a me vibe, so I'm excited to maybe pick it up. I also have Key Lime Sky by Al Hess. This features an alien invasion, and the main character, who was in desperate hunt of his favourite pie, is one of the only people who realise it's happening, and there are missing people and strange things going on, and so I think this one could be a really fun read as well. And then one I literally saw earlier today, that's called The Scandalous Letters of V and J by Felicia Davin. This follows two characters who are both trans, and it's a historical romance. It's all epistolary, and so it's told with them writing letters back and forth to each other. I really do tend to like those books. I read A Letter to the Luminous Deep last year, and the kind of diary style books like Emily Wilde and A Natural History of Dragons, so I do like those kind of epistolary tales, and so I've got that as well if I have time to get to it, because I have quite a few books on the agenda. So I'll leave you with that for now, and I'll see you soon when I start my first book. So I have finished Her Majesty's Royal Coven. I got through this, well, when I started it I was only 40 pages in the first night, so I wasn't going to update because I hadn't really got far enough in to give you any real commentary. And then yesterday I got 70% in before I went to bed, and I had to finish it this morning because unfortunately I accidentally spoiled what happens at the end of the book for myself by going onto the Goodreads page for book 2, and I don't know why I did it, because normally I don't, because there is risk of spoilers, but I guess I just assumed that the spoilers or what happened at the ending wouldn't be that significant, but oh boy was it. So in this book we follow a group of 5 witches who we see in the first chapter when they're young and they're taking their oath, and we meet them in adulthood where they're not really that close anymore. They all live their own separate lives, and they all are kind of in various levels of witchiness, essentially. Some of them have completely stepped back and kind of live a relatively mundane life, and some of them are very involved, and one of them is the High Priestess of Her Majesty's Royal Coven, which is, the acronym is HMRC, which is funny because that's the tax system in the UK. And I have to say, one thing I really do love about this is the quintessential Britishness of it. The first chapter, they're arguing about who is going to marry Stephen Gately. The fact that HMRC is set in Manchester, not London, I really appreciate that there was a focus on the fact that this is an urban fantasy that isn't set in London, because so many British urban fantasies are, and there are so many other places. So it was very northern, and there was just so many other elements of it that really were nice in that aspect. They were a little bit more relatable, I guess, than it being set in London, because, you know, there are a lot of people in the UK, including myself, who don't live in London and who go there very sporadically, and so it was just nice. The plot itself, there is a prophecy where they see the coming of this child who is going to bring about this Leviathan, which is a world-ending, changing beast, essentially. And 10 years prior to when the book is set, there was a war with a warlock who was a magical supremacist, essentially, and believed that witches and warlocks were stronger, more powerful than mundane people, and that they essentially needed to take over. And so if you know anything about Juno Dawson, about the UK, about magical trans things, aka J.K. Rowling, when you get into this, you do realise this is commentary on it being a magical story that has a high focus on LGBT characters, specifically trans characters, and what it means to be trans and magical. There's a minor plot twist in here. I say minor because I saw where it was going, and I think once you know going into it that it is kind of commentary on J.K. Rowling, you can make a guess as to what the quote unquote plot twist is. I think the real plot twist is what happens at the end of the book. One of our characters who becomes very transphobic, essentially spirals, and things really take a turn. And I did think that it was really interesting to see where that went, and the ending was, I mean, it was really surprising to me, and I do think I will be interested in picking up the second book. The only problem is that it has a trope in it that we know now, from the end of this book, what that trope's going to be. That is not one of my favourites, but I do think I would like to pick it up at some point. I don't think I even said I gave this a 4. Really pretty easy to read. It does touch on a range of different stuff, heavy on the transphobia at times, and also comments on intersectionality and other aspects. Stuff like the intersectionality, you know, one of our characters is mixed race and a lesbian, and there is talk about her setting up her own coven, specifically for those who are not seen in the HMRC. I do appreciate that was put in there. I think that ultimately Juno Dawson is white, and so it wouldn't have gone much further than it did in the book. So I appreciate that it was in there, but, you know, it would have also been nice to have seen more of that. It wasn't the real main plot of the story, which is fair enough, I suppose. This was a really great first read to start off the Trans Rights Readathon. Book 1 down. I'm sure a bunch of others are to go, because I've somehow managed to add another 2 books potentially to my TBR. Yeah. Okay, a few things. 1, I got a new tripod. I've got an actual proper tripod instead of the £5 one that I have. So new angle, prepare for the new angles all over the house. 2, the house next door, I think, or somewhere on my street, there is suddenly just started drilling or sawing something, literally as I sat down to start filming. So they've stopped, but if it starts again, I'm carrying on. I'm not stopping now. Onto the update. I started and finished Compound Fracture last night by Andrew Joseph White, and it's going to be a 4-star. I was going to say pleasantly surprised, but that's not kind of the right term, I guess. But I am glad that I liked it as much as I did. I think it's testament to how when you read a debut, you shouldn't just let it put you off continuing with an author's work. It's not to say that all debuts are bad, or even if a debut is like fine. It's just with Hell Followed With Us, I did like it. I did like the concept and the world building, but the plot wise, I wasn't really as much of a fan of the plot, and I just felt the relationships weren't as strong. But I think as the books have gone on, there has definitely been an improvement and a development, and I think this is probably writing wise the best out of the three YA books that I've read. You've got a large cast of characters in this one, and I do think that they were a lot more characters of their own. I think in this one we follow Miles, who is a young 16-year-old trans boy. He comes out to his parents in an email the same night that he gets the ever-living shit beat out of him, essentially, by the sheriff's son and his two friends. And there's a long history between Miles's family and the sheriff's family, dating back to a railroad strike a long time ago, and there's kind of been a bit of a feud between the two of them ever since. Different members of their families in this timeline have killed each other, and just there's a lot of tension in the town. The sheriff's family essentially blackmails everyone, has leverage against everyone, and so the world would be a better place without them there, but unfortunately they kind of rule with an iron fist. And as Miles has, you know, been beaten up, he's essentially getting threatened to keep quiet about what happened. And then accidentally Miles ends up killing one of the boys who was involved in hurting him, and it kind of takes a turn from there as we start to kind of see things spiral as people start to rise up against the sheriff and the control that they have over the town. Miles is our protagonist. We have a couple of other people. We have Lady, the little dog, who survives, by the way. Dog survives to the end, and in fact is a star at the end. We have Miles's family, the process that they're going through as they're coming to terms with him being trans. We have also Miles's friends, Cooper and Dallas, who he has kind of lost touch with at different points throughout time, due to circumstances about what goes on in the town, and so they're kind of rekindling their friendships, and also obviously the weight of this boy having died, and then things spiraling from there in terms of its vengeance, essentially. We also have Miles being able to see what we assume is the ghost of one of his long dead relatives, who is essentially encouraging him to get his own back, shall we say. Yeah, it was a 4-star for me. I did really like it. I do think this one probably edges out A Spirit Bares Its Teeth. I also gave that 4 stars. I think with this one, the breadth of the story was just so much more. I mean, it was so much larger, but I think it was just really well rounded. I do think there was maybe a few pacing issues towards the end, like things happen very quickly in that final couple of chapters, or that final kind of like 10%, but we're kind of spiraling towards the climax, so at the same time it is what it is. So it was a really nice read. I read it in one sitting, and that's another book done. So I'm 2 books down now. I was meant to say, I forgot in the first clip to say, part of the Trans Rights Readathon, if you can obviously, is to be able to donate some money to local trans charities in whatever area you may be. I'm going to be donating £10 for every book that I finish to Gendered Intelligence, which is a UK trans charity. I've donated to them in the past, last year as well. I'll put a little bit here about what they do. So yeah, I completely forgot to mention that when I was filming the original clip, so I thought I'd put it in here. I thought maybe what else I could do as well is go through and take a look at some trans books and put some more on my TBR, or maybe let you know what I already have on my TBR. I have a local online independent bookstore, a queer bookstore that I've shopped from quite a few times, called Proud Geek. It's based in the West Midlands. Other recommendations, Gaze the Word, and also, oh my god, what's the shop called? Is it the Gay Pride shop? It's the big Manchester one. I'll put it in here because I've forgotten what it is off the top of my head. I use them as well sporadically to go on and have a look at the deals that they have, because they tend to have quite good deals for books. Okay, I'll do the little magic thing and make myself small or whatever. Okay, so this is the Proud Geek website. I've already gone to the trans and non-binary category, but we do have a little section here where you can sort by whatever it is you're searching for. I thought I would just go through and see what it is that I'd be interested in reading, and maybe give you some recommendations if there's something that I have read or I have on my TBR. I don't really know. I just thought I'd have a look and kind of maybe fill some content in this video, because I seem to be finishing books in like pretty much one sitting, so I'm trying to make it interesting. The Floating Hotel is the second book by Grace Curtis. I read Frontier in 2023. I think I mentioned this before. I don't know if I'm going to give this one a go, but there is another book that they've published, I think called Idle Fire, which I'm thinking about giving a go because that looks quite interesting. It kind of goes along with what I was saying about debuts, and maybe not knocking debuts just based on the fact that they're, you know, a first book. There's plenty of time for development, and there's something we should all be acknowledging. But yeah, that's one that I'm potentially interested in reading. Murder in the Dressing Room I've seen a little bit about. It is, let's have a look. It's about a drag queen, I know that much. So by day, shy hotel accountant Jo hides behind her desk and plays by the rules. By night, Jo takes the stage as Missy Devine, upcoming star of the London drag scene. And then yeah, her drag mentor is found dead, and so it's a murder mystery with a drag queen lead. So I think that would be quite interesting to read actually. ASL is one that I have on my TBR. I know it's about video games, so a transformative story about video games, 3 queer friends, and the codes they learn to survive. So set in 1998, my birth year, a good year. Lilith, Sash, and Abraxa are teenagers, and they're making the Saga of Sorceress, a game that will change everything, if only for the 3 of them. 18 years later, Saga of the Sorceress still exists, and the unscattered drives of its creators. Lilith might be the first trans woman to ever work as an assistant loan underwriter at Dollarwise Investments in Brooklyn. Sash is in Brooklyn as well, working as a research assistant and part-time webcam dominatrix. Neither of them know that the other is there, or that Abraxa, the 3rd member, is just across the Hudson River, sleeping on the floor of a friend's grandparents' Jersey City home. They've been out of touch for years, but none have forgotten the sorceress or her quest, still far from finished. So I think that comes out, well, it comes out next month actually, so I'm going to be picking that one up. There is another another cover as well. I think I actually might prefer this cover, so I will have to get on ordering that, I think, because I want to pre-order a couple of books as well if I can. That's part of also the excuse of being able to use this to see what books that I might want to pre-order for reading for the rest of the year. We have Human Rights, the 3rd book in the HMRC series. I obviously would need to get to the 2nd book first, but I will be getting to that, I think, at some point this year. I'm going to see if I can get it out from the library first, but I will see if I can get it out. And then also Stag Dance by Tori Peters. I haven't read, oh my god, what's it called? Detransition Baby, but I've seen a lot of it recently because this book has just come out, and I think it's a collection of short stories, and so I'm wondering whether to start with that one and kind of dip in to the writing because I think they're quite speculative, so I would be interested in picking that one up, I think, as well. I have read a really short story by Margaret Killjoy, and I've been seeing this one pop up everywhere. I've also seen it in Waterstones as well, which I think is indie published, so that was kind of a nice surprise to see that it was there. I don't know if it is indie published, I could be making that up. So that one's a trilogy about trans witchcraft. Actually, good to know, because I'm doing my D&D book series video, and the mages, so the warlocks, wizards and sorcerers category is that we're all combined into one, because I thought, you know, how many books about magical people can I fit in? Honestly, so many. There are so many books about sorcerers. I cannot tell you. So I was going to split it into maybe a couple of videos, at least 2 anyway, because I have about 6 or something books already, and so I might actually add this one to the list of books to read for that. So good thinking me doing this, because it's working out for you. Walking practice I already have on my Kindle. I started the very beginning of it when I was trying to decide at one point what books I wanted to read and then I never ended up going any further, but I am interested in picking that up this year because I think, I mean, I've heard really good things, and also I love the cover, and I know that there's little illustrations throughout about what kind of forms that the alien in the story takes, so I am interested in reading that one as well. Hammer Journal Look I read recently. Key Lime Sky is on my TBR for this readathon. I have it out from the library right now, so I'm hoping to, I should be able to get to it. I've only got my 1 other physical book, well, that's a lie, sorry, I've got 2 other physical books, but my non-fiction I'll be reading little bits of, I guess, throughout the week, because I did start it yesterday, and it is, I mean, it's a non-fiction book, but it's obviously it's more like a short essay about the history of trans misogyny, but I'll get into it a little bit more because I've already got a little bit I'd like to say about it, but I'll get into that in a separate clip. But then I also have Little Fish physically, which is the only other book physically that I have that I was planning to read. And the weather is nice again today, so I'm thinking about going to sit outside and read it in a bit, because I'm not working today. So I've got that. And then I have obviously my online ones, and so my Kindle / my library books as well. So it's only Monday at the moment. I've got plenty of time to get through others. It's more of a case of which ones I'm going to get to, because I had another library haul come in yesterday, so I literally have probably about 5 books on my Kindle and from the library that I could read, and I need to give them all a bit of a try, I think, and see which one I prefer to read. There's Compound Fracture. Floating Hotel. Oh, it's the hardback. I was going to say again. What Feast at Night. The sequel to What Moves the Dead. I do want to get to that at some point. I read What Moves the Dead the other year. I just haven't got around to picking it up yet. I'm going to try and see if I can get it through the library. I know. I think my sister's read that series. I think that's the one with the poly vampires in it. It's hard to tell. The only thing about this is obviously it's hard to tell maybe what's YA and what's not, so I'm kind of like skirting around what I think I know is YA or what isn't, because even though I obviously just read a YA book and enjoyed it, typically I'm reaching for adult books more often anyway. Let's have a look. Spirit Bears Its Teeth. I do recommend that one. Trigger warnings for all. Andrew Joseph White's book. I was meant to say in the previous clip, one of the things I will say is that I do think that I'm a fan of the fact that he and other writers in the YA kind of sphere are able to handle such serious and gruesome topics with such care for YA audiences, because I do think, I mean, obviously it's not that these things weren't covered at all, but I do think when the books I was reading a lot as a teenager didn't tend to be as serious or handling such serious topics. Maybe it just wasn't the books that I was reading, and it was other books, but I do appreciate that. Trigger warnings for like pretty much everything going in, specifically kind of medical transphobia in that one, because it is set in the when is it set? Kind of like the Victorian era, with a lot of institutional transphobia in that one. Open Throat I've heard a lot about as well. I would like to get to that, I think, at some point. And Boys Weekend I have read. That's a graphic novel, which essentially follows the character, a trans woman who has gone, is it like a stag do? Or is it just a boys' weekend? I can't remember. I have it somewhere, I think. I just don't know where it is. And it's a graphic novel, and there is essentially this kind of like crazy alien invasion. I do recommend it. It is, you know, it's a graphic novel, so it's not too hard to get through, but I do recommend that one. While Running Down, I haven't soft DNF'd, but I just returned it back to the library because I didn't finish it. I did start that one by Al Hess, so I probably should try and pick that up at some point and actually try and finish it. Oh yeah, that is the series. That's the Silver Under Nightfall series. I knew I recognised it. Haley Piper. I have read. Oh god, what's it? The Worm and His King. The Worm and His Kings. I forget. I read that last year. I would definitely be interested in reading more by Haley Piper, because she definitely writes a lot of good horror, trans horror specifically. It Took Luke, I've heard things about as well. So the owner of Proud Geek posted a couple of reels and videos for the Trans Rights Readathon to recommend stuff, and this was one of them, and it definitely jumped out to me. The relationship crumbling, their job worse, their clothes covered in blood. Down on a luck exterminator, Sal Hernandez is sick of long hours, living in the work van and ready to reconcile with their estranged partner. The only thing standing in the way is one last shift. What seems like a routine job is anything but, and a proletising mass of flesh abducts Sal's newest co-worker. Ooh. Yeah, I think I'd definitely be interested in reading that one, because it seems very cosmic-y horror. That does seem like my kind of cup of tea. So I will add that one to the list and see if I can get it from the library first, but then I will, if not, I can always buy it. Although, did that say it was in stock? That's not. I'll have to notify myself when it's available. I have a book by Alexis Hall on my TBR, Mortal Follies. I have it physically. I've got a video idea for when I'm going to read it though in a couple of months, because I haven't got that. I don't even know where that sentence was going. Ignore that sentence. I have just picked up a graphic novel come through from the library by Ariel Slamet-Reese. I remember when Witchy was a webcomic and I started reading it, and it popped up. Was it maybe in a recommendation video? I can't remember what it's called, and I can't check now because I'm filming on my phone, but I'll insert it here about the graphic novel that's just come through from the library. So that would be a really quick read as well to get through this week. So I think I am going to try and prioritise that one because it's just an easy read and it's a nice break as well from physically reading, being able to look at some graphic novels. Phoenix Extravagant is one I've got out from the library at the moment. I do want to get to that one as well. I think that's one of the ones I'm going to prioritise digitally to get through. I have read the transgender issue. I've read that, oh my god, when did that come out? 2022? Yeah, that was a good guess. And it just talks about the transgender issue, especially in the UK. The Seep I've also read. I think I read that for my first trans rights readathon. It's following a older trans woman and this alien invasion, which is just transforming people and transforms her partner into like a young child, and her dealing with that kind of life and kind of loss. I do want to read these kind of like little short collections. They have a D&D one, I know, and there's also, I can't remember what the other one is, so I do want to maybe pick those up at some point. I'll try and get them from my library, I think. Lichcraft. I think I have heard of this. Oh, it's a game. No, I have heard of this. I was going to say it sounds familiar. It's a little tabletop RPG. I have heard of that. I'm going to have a look into that, I think. There is the book I was talking about by Gina Dawson that I'd read the other day. I read that a couple of years ago. Well, probably like in 2016. A couple of years ago. This is already a 16-minute clip. I might stop soon. Lumberjanes, I do recommend. I read quite a few Lumberjanes volumes. Oh god, probably a long time ago. I don't remember when. I do recommend that series because it's just a nice light-hearted set of like novels, graphic novels, so they're quite fun to read as well. Maybe it is time to stop because I can hear, oh, it is time to stop because I've just come to the end of the page, but also because I can hear the drilling again now, and I'm sure you can also hear the drilling. So hopefully this was useful to you, whether there's anything that you saw that jumped out to you. There's a couple of things I definitely need to add to my TBR. I will add also here a couple of books that I already have on my TBR that I'm interested in reading. You'll have to forgive my very shiny face. It's the same day, but I had to change because it's that warm outside. I put sun cream on for the first time this year. I've already managed to tan, although you cannot tell, or maybe you can tell a little bit from camera. Definitely managed to tan already. So it's been a very nice day. I'm glad that I was off work because I was very productive. I had a nice little lunch, and I also finished my book. I didn't check the time, but I think it's been a couple of hours since I last filmed, and I finished Little Fish, and it's going to be a 5-star. It was a really nice read. As I said, we followed Wendy, who finds out that her grandfather might be trans, and so it is kind of, the book is about that, but it kind of bookends the story because we find out that in the beginning, and it also rounds up the story in a really nice way. But the middle part of the story is a lot about Wendy. It's about her life as a trans woman, her trans friends, the community that she has. It's about sex work, it's about death and suicide and grief. It covers so many things, and I just think it was so well written. It's just so, the characters just feel like people, and it really does remind me of Any Other City by Hazel Jane Plant, which is another story about a trans woman and the life that she lived both as a teenager when she was figuring out her identity, and then also as an adult as well, as she's kind of coming to terms with everything that's gone on in her life. It was one of my favourite reads last year, and I do think that that story and this one really kind of parallel each other really well. And so yeah, it was a really nice read. Trigger warnings for a lot of different things, suicide, grief, sexual assault as well. There's a couple of different things in there, but I think well worth the read if you're interested in reading just a story about a person and her life and loss and her family relationships. And it was a really good read. I think I have I don't read a lot of contemporary fiction, but I do read a lot of more queer contemporary fiction, and I think it is like a specific little niche that I've really found myself really enjoying, and so I'm definitely going to pick up now Casey Plett's other book. I did look it up earlier, I completely forgot what it's called. Something Stories of a Woman, I think. It's a short story collection. But it was really funny because, well, not funny, but it was just coincidental that when I got to the end of the book and I was looking at the acknowledgements, the first 2 people mentioned in the acknowledgements are Tori Peters and then also Jean Thornton, who is the author of the book ASL, I'm pretty sure, that I was talking about earlier. So I was like, well, now I definitely need to go and pre-order it. Yeah, just a little sign. So I finished Little Fish. I'm now 3 books down. It's just such a nice day that I'm having a really fun time sitting outside reading. It's only like 3:30, so I've got plenty of time left in the day to keep reading. I think I will probably read a little bit of A Short History of Trans Misogyny, and then I'll also probably pick up my Kindle and have a little look through there about the books I've got and decide what it is that I'm going to read next. So I started and finished Phoenix Extravagant by Yoon-Ha Lee. I am going to give it 3 stars. It follows our main character Jebby, who is non-binary and an artist, and is trying really hard to make a living for themselves, because the country that they live in has been colonised by this other power, and their trade is essentially, they're struggling to make ends meet, and so they decide to rename themselves using the colonising powers naming system and enter in for their artist I was going to say artist academy, that's not the right word, enter into the Ministry of Art. But to do this they have to do a series of tests, and unfortunately they find out they don't make it, but somehow they end up getting a job instead at the Ministry of Armory, where they are tasked to paint essentially this dragon automaton, because the paint holds specific power and can cause them to essentially be under the control of this military. And so we follow the plot as Jebby is essentially kind of thrust into this world, and they have to figure out what exactly is going on, who they can trust, and also deal with their sister, who seems to be in contact with revolutionaries, and just the kind of weight of everything that's going on around them. I really like the idea of the plot. I really liked the world building, especially the paint and the automaton things to do with that. I thought it was really interesting. I think characters, their relationships weren't my favourite. There's a love interest and also the relationship with Jebby's sister as well. Those 2 different relationships I didn't feel were that strong, and I think our main character is very naive and so that was a little bit of a bugbear because they just seemed so at a loss with everything going on in the world around them, whereas everyone else was just way more clued up on, even just the basics of what was happening. But overall, I still like the plot. I wish we got more of the dragon. That's probably quite like a small thing to take out of the book, but it definitely was really interesting. And so it would have been nice to have seen the dragon a little bit more, because there's a connection that Jebby has with this dragon that I really did like. I also started a short history of transmisogyny, and I am through the first part and into the second part, and so I just thought I'd run through kind of what my thoughts are on this so far. The book discusses how, in the introduction, how trans woman is a very Western term, and so the term trans feminine is used, which I know parallels with stuff like gay and lesbian history, where we use the term lesbian like, or you know, gay behaviours, because those are still quite new terms in the context of history, especially because in the first chapter, where it looks at trans panic and this kind of excuse of trans panic and not knowing someone was trans, and that means, or that has meant, that people have used that as an excuse to really severely injure or in fact kill trans people, specifically trans women or trans feminine women. It uses examples in kind of modern-ish history, looking at the 1900s, but also goes back to colonial period as well, looking at India, where we have the hijras, and also in the 1800s in America, where we look at indigenous relationships with gender. And so we have these two parallel things that happened at the same kind of time at opposite areas of the world, that were both the result of colonialism, British colonialism in India, and American colonialism to the indigenous people in America. And so how the groups of people there cannot be referred to as trans women, because that is specifically not what they are. They are maybe trans feminine in the way they present, but they have their own identity and their own cultural history as well. And so I found that quite interesting to look at. It's something that I was slightly familiar with already, but it was really interesting to see just more examples. It also looks at how the term trans panic has been used in court in cases. There was a case that happened in 1998, I think, in the Philippines, where a trans woman was killed by an American military soldier, and how he was essentially protected for his entire time that he was supposed to have been imprisoned. And the trans lady, whose name was Jennifer Lord, was really loved in the community. There's a documentary about it, and it just shows how even recent times that excuse has been used as an excuse, and has been accepted as an excuse by governments to reduce sentences. And it's something that we can obviously still see reflected in present day as well, which is obviously really unfortunate. There are 2 more chapters I have left in this, so I'm going to try and read a chapter a night so that I can get through it, and I'll get back to you with more of my thoughts on this when I do. Hello, it's been a few days and I'm here to bring you updates on not 1, not 2, but in fact 3 books, because I have finished 3 since we last spoke, and I am calling my reading to an end here, because it is, what day is it? 29th. Took me a minute then, but tomorrow's Mother's Day and I'm all day at work on Monday, so I think that is probably a good place to call it here. So updates. I finished Key Lime Sky by Al Hess. This follows our main character Denver, who is also known as Professor Pie. Denver is non-binary, and one day when Denver is out of town, there is this strange thing that happens in the sky. People are starting to act strangely, and it turns out anyone who wasn't in town at the time is not affected by this. And so there is a bit of a conspiracy about it being aliens. There is these weird little shells and lots of sand, and people start going missing, and we meet our other love interest, who's called Ezra, who the first time that I meet, Denver was autistic and is very blunt and compares Ezra to a porn star, and so Ezra doesn't have the exact first best impression, and so they are kind of banded together because they are 2 of the only people who are still alive and cognizant in this town. And so it follows the 2 of them as they meet others and as they try and solve this alien invasion problem. Denver's got a blog, and it kind of went viral at the very beginning, just before the start of the book, and so there are a couple of comments interspersed throughout, which I really like. I like that kind of mixed media feel, where moments that Denver filmed got uploaded, because Denver has these contacts that records, and so things were getting directly uploaded to the blog, and so we're getting live commentary on a few of the strange things that were going on, because at first obviously people were like, we're here for pie, but now there's an alien invasion going on. Anyway, I gave it 3 stars. I thought it was a little bit meandering at times, but I think that's just because that you needed to build the relationship between Denver and Ezra. But ultimately it was, I mean, I don't want to say pretty lighthearted because it gets a bit dark in there for a little bit, but towards the end it starts to really get quite lighthearted and picks up as well, and it was an enjoyable time. Then I started and finished on the train today A Song for the Quiet by Cassandra Core. This is literally 80 pages, so it was a very quick read, but it's the sequel to Hammers on the Bone, which I read in my last video, which is a series which is Lovecraftian, and we follow a different main character this time called Deacon, who is a black man in America and has this passion for music, and something in his brain is not quite right, and there is something going on, and John Persons, who is the main character from the last book, makes an appearance as well. It's really short, 80 pages. I gave this one 3 stars as well. I think I preferred the first one just because it had that slight extra length, and because this one was still quite unnerving and unsettling, and I would say that this one kind of throws you in the deep end straight away, which if you've read the first book you kind of know what you're getting into, because this one really involves I mean, it reminded me of the Magnus Archives. I like just the kind of there was an episode where there is this, like, I can't remember what it's called, but like this musical instrument, and it makes people's ears bleed, and that's what this short story reminded me of, and so I think it was a nice little addition to this universe, and so if you are thinking of reading the series, it's 2 books altogether. They're like 200 pages between the 2 of them, and so they're really quick reads. Nice if you're wanting to edge into Lovecraftian horror. And then finally I finished A Short History of Trans Misogyny. I really like this. I think it was a really great, short, but also really detailed explanation of trans misogyny, and so it looks particular from the kind of 1800s onwards, post-slavery, at the way specifically mostly black people, but other different groups of trans people as well, or trans feminine people, are treated, and the kind of repercussions of the social climate at the time, where things were still difficult for people, and how being trans feminine and that identity became even more scandalising. Our last chapter looks at the late 1900s and the kind of Stonewall movement and Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, and how there is a difference between drag queens and street queens, and so that one was really informative to me. I didn't really know too much about that, especially the way really that you think about how Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera were so fundamental to Stonewall, and then were basically just shooed out the way, and how they identify it as well. It talks a lot about that, and so I think it was really informative. I do recommend it if you're looking for non-fiction. Referenced in here is another non-fiction book that I read last year, which is Black on Both Sides by Riley Snorton. I would go for this one first if you are interested, and because it's short and because it's quite accessible, Black on Both Sides is definitely a way more academic book, and so even I was struggling a little bit as I was going through it to kind of get to grips with what I was learning in it, just because of how academically kind of dense it is, but that's also a great one if you are looking at specifically the relationship between black people and being trans. So yeah, that's another recommendation. And speaking of recommendations, I said that I would give you a list of some others that I really liked, so I would be remiss if I didn't start by mentioning Hazel Jane Plant, who I read 2 books from the last 2 years. Any Other City, which is a fictional memoir from this fictional musician named Tracy, who is a trans woman, and it splits its time between Tracy's youth as she is discovering her identity and meets a group of trans women and starts to realise that maybe that she is trans, and then present day being 2019 in the book, as she is writing her memoir and reflecting on her youth and love and loss and all of these different things. That one is a real great favourite for me. I really loved it. I read that last year. It was one of my favourite books of last year. There's also Little Blue Encyclopedia for Vivian, which follows a nameless narrator who is talking about their friend Vivian, who has passed away, and the book is really unique in that it's told in a encyclopedia of this show Little Blue, which is a fictional TV show. And so I really enjoyed the fact that both the books by Hazel Jane Plant are told in such a kind of unique way. I really think they're great storytelling. So that's one set of recommendations. Another author is Rivers Solomon, who I've really enjoyed. An Unkindness of Ghosts, I think, is my favourite, and this is a sci-fi story, and it feels very Snowpiercer-esque. We're in this ship that is ranked by different levels, and kind of ascending the levels is pretty impossible. The story itself deals a lot with gender, and I really did like it. I read that one last year too. Rivers Solomon also has a whole other catalogue. You have Sorrowland, The Deep, and then also Model Home that came out fairly recently as well. I've read Andrew Joseph White's other books, Hell Followed With Us, and also A Spirit Bears Its Teeth. Both of these are YA books that look at relationships with gender and also the different kind of difficult social climates that they're in. Hell Followed With Us being this dystopian angelic cult setting, and A Spirit Bears Its Teeth being this more Victorian-esque setting with a lot of medical transphobia featured in it. Cassandra Core as well, I thought I should mention, as I've already mentioned their other books that I've just read, but The Dead Take the A Train was one of my favourite books from last year as well. This is an urban fantasy, a very gritty fantasy that has a lot of eldritch creatures in it as well, and follows our main character and as she kind of falls for her best friend and has to deal with her ex-boyfriend, who is in this kind of corporate eldritch setting, which I found really enjoyable. And then two other sets of recommendations. There is Fina and Defect by Nina Cipri. These are IKEA-esque stories with two different sets of characters in each book. I really enjoyed the second book, Defect, which has a discussion on gender and looks at clones, but I really enjoy that kind of fictional hospitality kind of setting that is just thrust into the supernatural. And then finally, Leech by Hiram Ennis. I read this I think maybe 2 years ago now, as I was really starting to get back into reading. It's set in a really cold dystopian town where a doctor arrives as a previous doctor has died, and they find out that something strange has gone on that caused this doctor to die, and there's something also very strange about the house that they're in and the town that they're in. I'm really excited to see that Hiram Ennis also has a new book coming out this year, so that is immediately gone on my TBR and I'll be anticipating when that releases in October. So yeah, that is all from me. I read 7 books for the Trans Rights Readathon, so I will be donating £70 to Gendered Intelligence, and I hope that this was able to provide you with some recommendations. As always, we should be continuing to read trans authors all year round.